There was a time when marriage vows meant something sacred. But what happened on Family Feud that afternoon would test one couple's commitment in front of millions of viewers. When Margaret Thompson stood at the podium and publicly questioned her husband Robert's loyalty after 23 years of marriage, even Steve Harvey, a man who had seen it all, couldn't hold back his reaction. What unfolded next would become one of the most powerful moments in the show's history, proving that sometimes the truth hurts, but healing requires honesty. If you enjoy stories about real relationships and the wisdom Steve Harvey brings to Family Feud, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. We bring you the most emotional and inspiring moments from the show every week. The Thompson family from Cleveland, Ohio, walked onto the Family Feud stage with bright smiles and matching burgundy shirts. Robert Thompson, 54, stood tall with silver hair and a confident demeanor that spoke of years in corporate management. His wife, Margaret, 52, was an elementary school teacher with kind eyes that crinkled when she smiled. Their 3 adult children, David, 28, Sarah, 25, and Jennifer, 22, stood beside them, completing the picture of what seemed like the perfect American family. But beneath the surface of coordinated outfits and rehearsed cheers, something was wrong. Steve Harvey, with his decades of experience reading people, noticed it immediately during the introductions. While Robert spoke enthusiastically about their family business and their children's achievements, Margaret's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Her responses were polite but measured, careful in a way that suggested words left unsaid. Margaret Thompson had been a teacher for 30 years. She had dedicated her life to nurturing other people's children, shaping young minds with patience and compassion. Her classroom was a sanctuary where students felt safe, where struggling readers found confidence, where troubled kids found understanding. Parents requested her specifically. Principals praised her dedication. But what most people didn't know was that Margaret poured herself into her students because her own home had become a place where she felt increasingly invisible. Robert Thompson had built a successful consulting business over 2 decades. He traveled frequently, attended conferences, worked late nights building client relationships. He provided well for his family, their home was paid off, their children had graduated college debt-free, retirement accounts were healthy. By every measurable standard, Robert was a good provider. He showed up to his kids' major events. He remembered anniversaries with expensive gifts. He never raised his voice or showed anger. But Margaret couldn't remember the last time Robert had asked about her day and actually listened to the answer. She couldn't recall the last time he had looked up from his phone during dinner, the last time they had talked about something deeper than schedules and logistics. 6 months ago, she had found text messages on his phone, nothing explicit, but conversations with a female colleague that had an intimacy their own marriage had lost. Long messages sent late at night about dreams and frustrations, inside jokes, emotional support during stressful times. When Margaret confronted him, Robert was defensive. "We're just friends," he insisted. "You're being paranoid." He accused her of not trusting him, of letting her insecurities damage their relationship. He made her feel guilty for even bringing it up. Eventually, Margaret stopped talking about it. The hurt settled into a cold distance. They became roommates managing a household rather than partners sharing a life. Their children noticed but said nothing. David, the oldest, had learned his father's emotional distance. Sarah had watched her mother's light dim over the years and vowed never to lose herself in marriage the way she believed her mother had. Jennifer, the youngest, still held hope that her parents' relationship was simply going through a rough patch, that the love that had created their family still existed somewhere beneath the surface. The Family Feud appearance had been Jennifer's idea. She thought maybe the experience of competing together, of being a team again, might remind her parents of their connection. She had submitted the application months ago, during a time when she still believed small gestures could heal big wounds. When they got selected, Robert agreed readily. He enjoyed being in front of people, the performer in him energized by attention. Margaret agreed because refusing would have meant explaining why, would have meant admitting out loud that their marriage was struggling, would have meant disappointing Jennifer. As the game progressed, the Thompson family performed well. They won the first round easily. Robert's competitive nature drove their energy, his quick answers and confident delivery earning applause from the audience. But Steve Harvey, observing from his host's position, noticed the dynamics. He saw how Robert would answer without consulting Margaret, how he would celebrate their points without acknowledging her contributions, how he occupied space as though he were competing alone rather than with a partner. The turning point came during fast money. The Thompson family had won the main game decisively, and now it was time for the bonus round that could win them $20,000. According to family tradition and Robert's assumption, he would go first. He was already positioning himself at the podium when Steve Harvey made an unexpected decision. "Actually," Steve said, his tone casual but his eyes sharp, "I'm going to switch this up. Margaret, you're going first." Robert's face showed surprise, then quickly masked disappointment. Margaret looked equally surprised but moved to the podium. Steve leaned in slightly, his voice gentler. "Margaret, you've been teaching for 30 years. You understand people. Trust your instincts here." The questions came quickly. Margaret answered with quiet confidence, her teacher's understanding of human nature guiding her responses. She scored 187 points, an excellent start that put tremendous pressure on Robert's upcoming round. The audience erupted in applause. Her children hugged her with genuine pride and surprise. But Robert's congratulations felt performative, his smile tight. Robert stepped to the podium needing only 13 points to win the $20,000. It should have been simple, but something in him had shifted. The questions began and Robert rushed his answers, trying to match his wife's performance, trying to prove something. His first answer missed. His second answer missed. The audience gasped. By the third question, Robert was visibly rattled. He finished with only 8 points. They had lost fast money despite Margaret's strong performance. Steve Harvey stood between them as the totals were revealed. In his years of hosting, he had seen many families lose fast money, but the energy in this moment was different. There was a tension, an undercurrent of something unresolved, and then Margaret spoke, her voice cutting through the polite disappointment. "I'm not surprised," Margaret said quietly. The studio fell silent. "Robert's never been good at showing up when it really matters." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Their children froze. The audience murmured uncertainly. And Steve Harvey's expression shifted from his usual jovial host persona to something much more serious. He had been in entertainment long enough to know when something real was breaking through the performance. Robert's face flushed red. "That's not fair, Margaret. I do everything for this family." "You provide money," Margaret interrupted, her voice still quiet but carrying a weight of accumulated pain. "That's not the same as being present. That's not the same as being loyal." The word loyal carried specific weight, and Robert clearly heard it. "We're not doing this here," he said firmly, his voice low but tense. "Why not?" Margaret's voice finally rose. "We don't do it at home either. When have we ever talked about what's really wrong? When have you ever asked why I can't sleep at night, why I teach later and later just to avoid coming home to silence?" Steve Harvey stepped forward. The producers were signaling for a commercial break, but Steve waved them off. This was bigger than the show's format now. This was a family in crisis, and Steve, who had been married, divorced, remarried, and had learned hard lessons about relationships, recognized that running from this moment would only deepen the wound. "Hold on," Steve said, his voice commanding attention. "We're going to deal with this right now. Margaret, Robert, your children are standing right there. Your family is here. Whatever is happening, this moment right here is an opportunity." Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "I found the messages, Robert, 6 months ago. The late-night texts with Rachel, the emotional intimacy you give her but won't give me. You said it was nothing, but it destroyed me, because even if you never physically cheated, you chose to share your heart with someone else." The children stood in shocked silence. This was news to them. Jennifer's eyes widened with hurt and confusion. David's jaw tightened. Sarah moved closer to her mother instinctively. Robert's defensive posture wavered. "Margaret, I told you we're just colleagues. You're making this into something it isn't." "Stop!" Steve Harvey's voice cut through Robert's words. "Stop right there. Man to man, I'm going to tell you something. What your wife is describing, emotional intimacy with another woman while your wife feels alone, that's infidelity. Maybe not legally, maybe not physically, but in every way that matters to a marriage, you've been unfaithful." The weight of Steve's words settled over the stage. The audience sat in complete silence, witnessing something raw and real. Steve Harvey, the comedian and entertainer, had transformed into something else, a wise elder speaking truth that needed to be heard. "I've been where you are, Robert," Steve continued, his voice gentler now but still firm. "I've been the man who thought providing was enough, who thought as long as the bills were paid and I didn't do anything wrong, I was being a good husband. But your wife doesn't need a provider, she needs a partner. She needs someone who sees her, who chooses her every single day, not just on anniversaries or special occasions." Robert's defensive walls were cracking. "I work hard for this family. Everything I do is for them." "No," Steve interrupted. "Everything you do is for you to feel like a good man. Real partnership, real marriage is about more than money. It's about being emotionally present. It's about not letting another woman fill the space your wife should occupy in your heart." Steve turned to Margaret, his expression softening with understanding. "And Margaret, I hear you. I hear the pain of being married but feeling alone, of watching your partner give to someone else what they won't give to you. That kind of hurt runs deep because it makes you question your own worth." Margaret nodded, tears streaming down her face. I just wanted to matter to him the way I used to. I wanted him to look at me the way he did when we were young. I wanted to be chosen. But here's what I need both of you to understand, Steve said, looking between them. This moment right here, this public moment of truth, this can be the end or this can be the beginning, but you have to choose. He looked at Robert directly. You need to decide if you want to be right or if you want to be married. You can keep defending yourself, keep minimizing your wife's pain, keep pretending that emotional intimacy with another woman is innocent. Or you can acknowledge the truth, that you've been unfaithful to your wife's heart, that you've prioritized your ego and your comfort over her needs, that you've been a provider but not a partner. Something in Robert's face changed. The defensiveness that had been his shield began to crumble. When he looked at Margaret, really looked at her for the first time in what seemed like months, he saw the pain he had caused. He saw the woman who had stood beside him for 23 years, who had raised their children, who had created a home, who had loved him even when he made it difficult to do so. Margaret, Robert's voice broke. I'm sorry, you're right about all of it. I've been telling myself the text messages didn't mean anything because nothing physical happened. But I was lying to myself. I was getting something from Rachel that I should have been getting from you, that I should have been giving to you. And instead of fixing what was broken in our marriage, I found an escape. The audience watched, many with tears in their own eyes, as Robert continued. I made you invisible in your own marriage. I made you feel like you had to compete for my attention, and I'm so sorry. Steve nodded slowly. That's a start. But Robert, apologies are only the beginning. The real question is, what are you going to change? Because Margaret doesn't need your words, she needs your actions. She needs you to cut off the inappropriate relationship. She needs you to choose her every day. She needs you to do the work to rebuild what you've damaged. Robert looked at his wife. I'll do whatever it takes, counseling, therapy, whatever you need. I'll end the friendship with Rachel completely. I'll prove to you that I choose you, that I choose us. And Margaret, Steve turned to her, you have a choice too. You can hold on to this hurt, let it poison whatever future you might have. Or you can give him the opportunity to earn back your trust. Not immediately, not easily, but over time with consistent actions that show he's changed. That choice is yours. No one can tell you what to do. Margaret took a shaky breath, her hands trembling as she processed the magnitude of this moment. The studio was silent except for the sound of her breathing. 23 years of marriage flashed through her mind. The wedding day when Robert had promised to cherish her always, the births of their 3 children, the countless dinners and conversations and shared moments that had slowly eroded into polite distance. I don't know if we can fix this, Margaret finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. But I know I don't want to give up without trying, not after 23 years. Not without knowing if the man I married is still in there somewhere, buried under years of taking each other for granted. She looked at her children, seeing their pain and confusion reflected back at her. I need you all to understand something. This isn't about the text messages alone. It's about feeling like I became invisible in my own marriage. It's about watching your father give emotional energy to his work, to his hobbies, to everyone except me. The messages were just the confirmation of what I already felt, that I didn't matter to him anymore. Their children, who had stood frozen throughout this exchange, finally moved. Jennifer approached her mother first, tears streaming down her face. Mom, I'm so sorry, Jennifer sobbed. I thought bringing us here would help. I thought maybe if we were a team again, playing together, laughing together. I didn't know it would end up like this. I didn't know about the messages. Margaret pulled her youngest daughter into an embrace, her own tears flowing freely now. Sweetheart, you gave us something we desperately needed, a moment where the truth couldn't hide anymore. This isn't your fault. None of this is your fault. David stepped forward, his jaw tight with emotion. He put a hand on his father's shoulder, not quite forgiveness, but acknowledgement. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of years of observation. Dad, I've watched you my whole life. I learned from you how to be successful in business, how to provide, how to achieve. But I also learned how to emotionally distance myself from the people I love. I'm in therapy now because I was becoming you and my girlfriend was becoming Mom, invisible and hurt. The words hit Robert like a physical blow. His son, his eldest, his pride, was in therapy because of patterns learned in this household. Sarah, always the most analytical of the 3 siblings, spoke next. Her voice was steady, but her eyes glistened with unshed tears. I told myself I would never get married because of what I saw at home. 2 people who stay together because it's easier than leaving, who build separate lives under one roof, who perform happiness for the outside world while dying inside. I didn't want that loneliness disguised as partnership. She looked at both parents with a mixture of pain and hope. But maybe there's still time for you to show me a different model. Maybe it's not too late for you to actually fight for each other instead of just coexisting. The family stood in a circle on the Family Feud stage, cameras capturing every moment of their raw vulnerability. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was a family confronting their deepest truths together, exposing their wounds in the hope of healing. Steve addressed the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen, what we just witnessed is something television doesn't usually show. We saw a marriage in crisis. We saw hurt and betrayal, but we also saw the possibility of healing, because that's what real love is, not the easy moments, but the choice to fight for each other even when it's hard." He turned back to the Thompson family. "You didn't win the money today, but you won something more important if you're willing to do the work. You won honesty. You won a chance at a real partnership instead of a polite performance." What happened next went beyond the normal scope of Family Feud. Steve made an unprecedented announcement. "The show is going to provide you with 6 months of marriage counseling, real, professional help from people who can guide you through this, because what's happening here matters more than a game show prize." When the episode aired 3 weeks later, it became one of the most watched and discussed moments in Family Feud history. The network initially hesitated about including the full exchange, but Steve insisted. "People need to see this," he told the producers. "They need to see that marriage is work, that loyalty means more than just not cheating, that emotional faithfulness matters as much as physical faithfulness." The response to their original appearance was overwhelming and immediate. Within hours of the episode airing, social media exploded with reactions. Thousands of viewers reached out sharing their own stories of emotional infidelity, of feeling invisible in their marriages, of the slow erosion of partnership into parallel lives. #Thompson Family trended for 3 days straight. Marriage counselors across the country reported significant increases in couples seeking help, specifically citing the Thompson family's courage in being vulnerable as their inspiration to finally address their own relationship issues. Online forums buzzed with discussions about what constitutes emotional cheating, what loyalty truly means, and how to rebuild trust after betrayal. Mental health professionals began using the episode as a teaching tool. Therapists showed clips in their sessions to help clients understand emotional infidelity. Relationship coaches incorporated the story into their workshops. Universities studying family dynamics added it to their curriculum as an example of public intervention leading to private healing. 6 months later, Family Feud invited the Thompson family back for an update segment. The invitation came with no pressure. They could decline if they wanted privacy. But Margaret and Robert agreed immediately. They had a story to tell, and they wanted to share it. When they walked onto the stage this time, the difference was visible even before anyone spoke. Margaret and Robert appeared together, their body language noticeably different from 6 months earlier. They stood closer, naturally gravitating toward each other rather than maintaining careful distance. Robert's hand rested gently on Margaret's back, not possessively, but protectively, lovingly. When they looked at each other, there was something that hadn't been there before: genuine presence, real connection. Steve Harvey greeted them warmly, then got straight to the question everyone wanted answered. "So tell us and be honest, how are you doing?" Margaret spoke first, her voice clear and strong. "The counseling saved our marriage, but more than that, it taught us how to actually be married. For years, we'd been two people sharing a house and a last name, but we weren't partners. We weren't truly choosing each other every day." She turned to look at Robert, her eyes soft. "We're learning to communicate now, not just about schedules and logistics, but about our feelings, our needs, our fears." Robert cut off all contact with Rachel immediately after our first appearance here. He changed jobs to remove the temptation and proximity, and he's been showing up, really showing up, in ways he hadn't for years. "We're dating each other again," she continued with a small smile. "Friday nights are our time. No phones, no work, just us. We talk, we laugh. We remember why we fell in love in the first place, and slowly, day by day, we're rebuilding trust." Robert spoke next, and the audience could hear the change in him, not just in his words, but in the vulnerability with which he spoke them. "I had to face some brutal truths about myself," he began, "about how I was prioritizing my ego and my comfort over my wife's emotional needs. About how I'd been treating our marriage like it would just maintain itself as long as I didn't do anything obviously wrong." He took a breath before continuing. "The hardest thing was admitting that I had been emotionally unfaithful. I kept telling myself that because nothing physical happened with Rachel, I hadn't done anything wrong. But I was lying to myself. I was sharing parts of my inner life with her that belonged to Margaret. I was seeking emotional intimacy outside my marriage instead of fighting for it inside my marriage. In counseling, I learned something crucial," Robert continued, his voice thick with emotion. "Marriage requires active choosing every single day. It's not enough to not cheat. It's not enough to provide financially. You have to choose your partner emotionally, mentally, spiritually. You have to prioritize their heart, their needs, their dreams." He reached for Margaret's hand. I'm learning to be the husband she deserves. Some days I fail, some days I fall back into old patterns, but Margaret calls me on it now and I listen. And every day I'm trying to be better than I was yesterday. Steve nodded with satisfaction. That's the real victory right there. Not the money you didn't win that first day, but the marriage you chose to fight for. The Thompson family's story became a teaching moment that extended far beyond the show. Marriage seminars began using the episode as a case study. Churches incorporated it into relationship counseling programs. Online forums buzzed with discussions about emotional fidelity and the importance of active partnership. Steve Harvey himself was deeply affected by the experience. In interviews afterward, he spoke about how the moment reinforced his understanding of the platform he had. "I'm not just a game show host," he said. "I'm someone who has the opportunity to speak truth into people's lives." When I saw Margaret's pain and Robert's defensiveness, I knew I couldn't just move on to the next question. I had to address what was really happening. The Thompson children also grew from witnessing their parents' crisis and recovery. David began working on his own emotional availability in his relationship. Sarah started therapy to process her fears about marriage. Jennifer learned that love sometimes means having hard conversations, that true partnership requires vulnerability and courage. 1 year after their original appearance, Margaret shared a reflection that captured the essence of their journey. "That day on Family Feud, I didn't plan to say anything. I had been holding in the hurt for so long, but something about the moment, the game we lost, the pattern of Robert taking center stage, Steve's perceptive questions, it all came together and the truth just came out. And I'm grateful it did, because living with unspoken pain was killing our marriage slowly. The public confrontation forced us to deal with what we'd been avoiding." Robert added his perspective. "I was humiliated when Margaret called me out in front of everyone. My first instinct was to get defensive to protect my image. But Steve wouldn't let me hide behind excuses. He called me out on my behavior in a way that broke through my denial. And I realized I could either protect my ego or save my marriage. I chose Margaret. I chose us." The story of the Thompson family serves as a reminder that loyalty in marriage means more than avoiding physical infidelity. It means emotional faithfulness, consistent presence, and the active choice to prioritize your partner's needs alongside your own. It means seeing your spouse, hearing them, and making them feel valued every day. Steve Harvey's refusal to stay silent during that confrontation demonstrated the power of speaking truth in the moment. He could have called for a commercial break, smoothed over the tension, and moved on with the show. Instead, he recognized a family in crisis and used his platform to offer wisdom born from his own experiences with relationships. Years later, the Thompson family remains together, their marriage stronger for having survived its darkest moment. They occasionally speak at marriage retreats, sharing their story with other couples struggling with similar issues. Their message is consistent. Emotional fidelity matters, communication is essential, and healing is possible when both partners are willing to do the work. The episode continues to resonate with viewers because it touched on a truth many people live but few discuss openly: that marriages can die slowly from neglect and emotional distance, even without obvious betrayal. That loyalty requires more than just not cheating. That partnership means actively choosing your spouse every day, not just on special occasions. Margaret's courage in speaking her truth, Robert's willingness to hear it and change, and Steve Harvey's refusal to let the moment pass without intervention. These combine to create a powerful example of how relationships can heal when people are brave enough to be honest. For anyone watching who sees their own relationship in the Thompson family story, the message is clear. It's never too late to choose differently. It's never too late to ask for what you need, to acknowledge where you've failed, to do the hard work of rebuilding trust and intimacy. Marriage requires more than vows spoken at a wedding. It requires daily commitment, consistent presence, and the courage to face hard truths together. The Thompson family didn't win $20,000 that day on Family Feud, but they won something infinitely more valuable. They won a second chance at the marriage they both wanted. And sometimes that's the real jackpot. If this story touched your heart and reminded you of what truly matters in relationships, please hit that like button and subscribe. We share the most powerful and inspiring moments from Family Feud every week, because these aren't just game show clips. They're real life lessons about love, loyalty, and the courage to choose each other even when it's hard.